Namaste everyone and welcome to another session on Srimad Bhagavad-Gita. Today we will try and review chapter 1 to chapter 3. But before we do that, we need to start by figuring out what is the position of Srimad Bhagavad-Gita in our civilization. Our civilization, we can trace it back to roughly 4000 to 4500 BC, starting with the Rig Veda, which was composed somewhere in the Punjab, which in those days is called Sapta Sindhu, because it was the 5 rivers of Punjab plus Saraswati. According to archaeologists, Saraswati used to get its feeds from the Yamuna and the Satluj, and it would empty somewhere close to Dwarka. It used to empty into the Bay of into the Gulf of Cambay in near Dwarka. Now what happened is that, so it is the Sapta Sindhu which is the cradle of our civilization, and somewhere when there was probably an earthquake which pushed the Vindhyas up, as a result of which the Yamuna turned in towards the Ganga and the Satluj turned towards the Chenab, which is why the feed waters of the Saraswati got dried up, and Saraswati itself disappeared. And today it's called the Hakra Gaggar stream, which runs throughout Rajasthan. And because it dried up, we have a mass migration. So we have the God Saraswati Brahmans who come down south or go into Kashmir. It is also the reason probably why we had India's first civil war. This civil war was called Dasarajna, and it was fought between two camps. One camp was headed by Vishwamitra, who was the king of the Bharata tribes, and the other side was headed by a person called Sudas, whose guru was Vasishta. And they fought on the banks of the river Ravi, somewhere near present-day Lahore, where Sudas defeated Vishwamitra and killed him. Now, we have to try and understand what is it that makes us who we are. The first part is that Hindu as a word does not exist. It is an exogamous word. It has been assigned to us. Sanatana Dharma also does not exist. It is another word that has been assigned to us. Then who are we? What kind of people are we? What is our civilization? This civilization, or what we call as Hindu, gets its basis out of one fundamental understanding, that all knowledge comes from the Vedas. Number one, and number two, that the Vedas are Apourushiya. What does this mean? The acceptance that the Vedas are the prime source of information and knowledge, all knowledge of the universe, means that everything that is told in the Vedas about the universe is correct, and that is the only source of knowledge. And that knowledge came from by itself. So how is that possible? Logic that we use is that knowledge is everywhere. It is there in the universe. We are unable to understand all knowledge fundamentally because we are trapped in our world, this world that we live in. And because we are so fascinated by whatever material things we have, so we are unable to trap the other knowledge that exists in the ecosphere. So when you practice yoga, you stop getting or you release the attachment you have to the body or Annamaya Kosha. When you release the attachment to the Pranamaya Kosha, when you release the attachment to the way the cognitive apparatus functions, and when you stop being afraid and you are able to let go the relationships and attachments you have to the physical belongings around you, then you have nothing to be afraid of, nothing that constrains you and keeps you attached to the physical structures that exist. As a result of this, what happens is that you are able to start gleaning more information from the universe. Let me give you an example. My grandfather was born in Madurai, which is a city in Tamil Nadu. At the very young age of about 14, he was taught some basic asanas by a Maharashtrian lady. Then he moved to Bangalore at the age of 19. They were very poor, and he had absolutely no background in music. He was not taught formal Carnatic music at all. But he started writing. First, he started teaching yoga at the age of 21. So this makes him the oldest yoga teacher in South India. He started writing about yoga in Ananda Vigadan. He wrote the world's first yoga manual in English, which was his preferred language until then. Then he wrote in Ananda Vigadan, but he met his guru when he was 42. And all of a sudden, one day when he was meditating, a song came to him. Now, this is a person who has no background in music, but it was a raga called Maya Madava Gaula. And he composed a song on a popular Indian deity called Murugan and sang it. He sang it to my aunt, who was professionally trained. Now, how did a person who has no formal understanding of Carnatic music, how was he able to compose a kirtana or a very structured, properly structured composition without any knowledge? That is Apourushiya. That is, you have gone beyond the state where your normal functioning is no longer valid. You are in a state where it comes to you in the form of an outpouring and you are unable to stop it. And that is what the Vedas are. The Vedas have come to these rishis, and that is why they are called rishi. Rishi means he who sees. So these rishis in dhyana or in deep understanding of the self get these outpourings, and they in turn make it into verses. Vedavyasa only compiled them, but many of these people have composed many of these verses. Vedavyasa has then taken them all up, put them into a proper order, and then made it into the various Vedas. Especially the Rig Veda. Most of the time, most of Vedavyasa's work is on Rig Veda, because thereafter each of the other Vedas, whether it is Krishna Yajurveda or any other Veda, these are all can be assigned to specific people. But Vedavyasa is the one who compiled everything. Now, that means that what we understand as knowledge is not knowledge. For example, let us take the basis of physics today. Newton. Newton was sitting under a tree watching, doing nothing. He was in a state of nothing. And the apple fell. The apple's fall for most of us would be just an apple falling. You would have picked it up and eaten it. But that did not happen with Newton. What did Newton do? He wondered, why has the apple fallen? And then the whole system started working within himself. And at some point, the eureka moment comes. Just as it comes for Archimedes, who is then bobbing, and then suddenly he is able to understand buoyancy. Or the invention of, or the C6H6, which is the benzene hexane ring. It was a most difficult organic chemistry problem. What is the structure of the benzene ring? How does it happen? And this chap's dreaming, and suddenly he sees a snake catching its own tail. And then the eureka moment comes, that this is the reason why benzene has that structure. This is all Apourushiya. And Apourushiya is not necessarily only for our system. So those that follow this accept that the Vedas are the primary source of knowledge and that it is Apourushiya are called Astikas. Astika is not belief in God. Astika is acceptance that the Vedas are the primary source of knowledge and they are Apourushiya. So we are all Astikas. And the system that we follow is Astika Samajam. This is the most accurate representation or depiction of who we are. Now, from Astika, the Astika splits into two. One is for the normal Laukika or people, the way people must live, which is called Dharma. And the other one is what we call the philosophical part, which is the Vedanta, Vedanga, Shaddarshana, Brahma Sutra, Purana, Itihas, all of that. So in the Dharmic part, the Dharma Shastra, the backbone of who we are comes from what is called samskara. That is the stages in life. So it starts with Vivaha Samskara, and then the parents have a child, and then the way they look after the child through Grahastha Asrama is then depicted. Now, as far as the philosophical part is concerned, it has got there are multiple ways in which that can be described. But it is very important to understand that what we say who we are is fundamentally driven by evidence. That means you can take, because it's a very open structure. See, let's look at it in the form of a computer. In a computer, you have Windows. In a Windows format, it is very rigid. You have to put something in a particular place in order to get a particular outcome. However, if you take something called Linux is an open architecture. Anybody can go and do what they like. Similarly, ours, the Astika Samaja, is an open architecture. It does not say this has to be right, because a Rishi may come, he may get new knowledge and he may contribute. And that cannot be denied. It can be challenged and he must support it. Just as Adi Shankara was one of the top philosophers, he went in and had lots and lots of arguments and discussions to prove that what he was doing was correct. So, our system has a very critical requirement. There is no such thing as there is only one absolute truth, and that is the Brahman. The Brahman is a cognitive position. That is, what I am telling you now is not cognitive. It is an intellectual exercise. you have to cognize it internally. You have to recognize it internally. For that, you have to go into the state of null. You have to imagine the state of null. Let me give you an example of what that state might be. I once asked my grandfather whether he had seen God. He said yes. And that kind of threw me because I was a young engineering student and I couldn't believe that anybody could see God. So he said yes. So I laughed at him. So he said, listen, just because you don't cognize it, don't say it does not exist. This is the first rule which our system asks us to do. Don't assume that somebody else is incorrect. Which opens a Pandora's box, because that means that you can't say anything is right or wrong. Everything is shades of grey. So then I asked him, how does one cognize God? So he said, you stand in the middle of a railway track and you look at the railway lines that are going in front of you. What do you see? I said, they seem to meet at an end. He said, but are they meeting? I said, no. So, what you are dealing with now is a transactional truth. It is Samvriti Satya. The absolute truth is that they don't meet. So this is very important, that our system asks us to requires us to seek proof. These proofs are called pramanas. Pramanas are basically you have pratyaksha. Pratyaksha is the highest level of pramana. That means I have personal experience, which is why experience is so important for us. One of the things that we all often forget is that when we talk to our elders or when we meet our elders, we bow down to them. It is called naman, namaskara. Why do we do that? Who do we do it to? Are we doing namaskara to the elder? Are we doing namaskara to the relationship? Or are we doing namaskara to something else? We are not doing namaskara to the individual. We are not doing namaskara to the physical entity. We are doing namaskara to the experience or the Purusha. We are doing, the Purusha is the one that has incurred karma or action. It has gained experience and it has reached a point where it is no longer embedded in the small problems of the world. So what does that mean? Whenever we act with anybody, we have one of two outcomes. We either like or dislike. When we like somebody, we give Ashirvada. When we don't like somebody, we may not consciously say it, but it is a Abhishapa. Which is why how we control our cognition is very important. So, what happens is, when we bow down to an elder, we know at that point that the quantum of Ashirvada is far more than the Abhishapa. So, because they have experienced the travails of life, they have gone through life and they have experienced all of that, which in itself is what we call tapas or austerity. They don't need anything anymore. That is at least the intent, that they don't need it. So they have reached a stage of tapas where they have tapas shakti. So when we do namaskara to them, they are actually called Mahanubhavu. Mahanubhavu means Maha Anubhavu. Yentaro Mahanubhavulu. Antariki Vantanalu. What does it mean? It means to all these people who are the Purushas, who have so much tapashakti, to them I offer my Vandana. And that is what we are doing namaskara to. It is very important that we understand this. Because all the time they come, they will touch the feet without actually letting go their own we do that without letting go our own inhibitions. When we have our inhibitions and we don't let it go, the tapashakti of the others do not grace us. Similarly, the person who is doing Ashirvada, if that person has not let go the Purusha or the individuality or the Asmita, then the Ashirvada is only to the extent that the person can give it. Now, this means what? There is another thing that we need to get into in terms of samskara. We then do what we call Shraddha. During Shraddha, we get Brahmanas to have lunch. Why do we call Brahmanas? Because Brahmanas are supposed to do Nitya Karma, Anushtana, which is supported by what is called the Gayatri. Now, if you look at the Gayatri mantra, Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha. Bhur is what? Bhur is the earth. Bhuvar is the atmosphere. Svar is the solar system. They are all cognitive. Swaha is solar system. It is not Swarga. Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha. Tat is the Brahman. Savitur Varenyam. That Brahman which gives the power to Savita. What is Savita? Savita is the natural state of the sun, the energy of the sun. Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Divi. Let that same level of excellence be bestowed upon us. So, the Gayatri mantra is what we call Avahana. That is, you do Avahayami. Please come in Gayatri, become one with me. And then you do the Gayatri Japa. When they do that, the tapas shakti of those people begins to ascend because that energy begins to resonate within the container. So as the resonance increases inside the person, the tapas shakti begins to increase. So it is somewhat like laser. You take a light and you put it through a crystal. What happens? It begins to bounce. And as it begins to bounce, after some time, the frequencies begin to condense. And then when you direct it at some other point, two things happen. One is it gets distance because it has got the internal energy has gone very high. Second is its power to destroy also increases because it has got that kind of density of energy. Similarly, your tapas shakti means you are like a capacitor. You keep on adding charge and then you can discharge. And how do you discharge? You discharge when you have the ability, you begin to let go. You open the gates, only then you can discharge your tapas shakti. But nobody in his right mind is going to give his tapas shakti to another person. So when the Brahmana comes for lunch, you are supposed to, we welcome them, make them sit, wash their feet, give them all the respect so that slowly their diffidence, because after all they are human beings, they come to the house, we treat them with a kind of respect because Atithi Devo Bhava. He is not Atithi, he is Tithi because Atithi means who is unannounced. He is not unannounced. But still, there is a diffidence, there is a filter between him and us. So what we have to do is we have to break down that filter. To break down that filter, you have to surrender your asmita. And you have to make that person so comfortable that at some point during the process, that person's soul discharges that tapashakti for that pitru. And makes everybody, gives Ashirvada to everybody. So that's no longer the individual who is giving out his tapashakti, it is the soul that is giving out the tapashakti. Because he is unable to even stop himself. You have made yourself, taken that point, the person to a point where he is quite happy to let it go. That is the beauty of our system. It is primarily and predominantly based on the consciousness. And that is why it is a practice. Practice based on data, the pramanas. That is Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Arthapati, Shabda Pramana, and all of those. How does Srimad Bhagavad Gita fit into all of this? Now, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, the interesting thing is, it is a book of yoga. It is not a book of Vedas. But it condenses the entire knowledge of the Vedas and yoga into a single text. So, what is the background of Srimad Bhagavad Gita? Srimad Bhagavad Gita is essentially one that is written on a battlefield. So, it's a book of the Kshatriyas. Of particular knowledge is that the Kuru-Panchalas, who are the protagonists or the two sides. So the Kurus are, of course, there are two families who fight with each other in the Kurus. The Panchalas are those who are also related to them, but they form their own Gotra. And the person who starts the Panchala is a guy called Bharmiyashva. Bharmiyashva captured a piece of land north and south of the Ganga in what is today called Farrukhabad, put his capital as Kampila. And then the five of them, he had 5 sons, and he said that my 5 sons are of very great capability, and so this particular land will be called Panchala. Now, of particular interest is this. What was there before Bharmiyashva took that piece of land, and why did he come there? The only answer that is making sense is that the Saraswati got dried up and these people went looking for fresh land where they could settle. It is a migration. So these people were in Punjab before that, and then they moved to UP, what we call UP today. They were north and south of the Ganga. The grandson, the son of Mudgala, who is the eldest in the family, is a guy called Divodasa. Divodasa had a set of twins. One, the boy is called Sudasa and the other girl is called Ahilya. Or I may be wrong. Divodasa and Ahilya, I think, are the twins. Ahilya married sage Gautama, and her great grandchildren were Kripi and Kripa. Kripa is Kripacharya, Kripi married Dronacharya. Divodasa's son, third son, is a guy called Sudas. Sudas led the opposition against Vishwamitra, who fought on the banks of the river Ravi. Sudas's great grandson is Drupada, who fought with Dronacharya and lost the northern part, north of Ganga. And after the Mahabharata war, Ashwatthama became the king of that particular place. South. After the general of that was, after Drupada was not the general of the Pandavas. It is Drishtadyumna, who is the brother of Draupadi. After Drishtadyumna is Drishtaketu, but after that the line is completely silent. Now, it is this evidence is available in Srimad Bhagavad Purana. If for those of you who are wondering where I got the data from. So the first chapter, this is the scene. These are all related. Every one of them is related, and they are fighting with each other for land. And the fight for land is probably because of the drying up of the Saraswati. Now, when the fight happens, Arjuna, the warrior prince, is full of josh on the day one, and he asks his charioteer, Sri Krishna, and says, I want to go between the two armies to see who all are there. Now, we must recognize one thing. Kali Yuga has not started yet. Kali Yuga starts only with the death of Sri Krishna. Some people say that Kali Yuga started with the death of Karna. Now, verdict is out, and I'm taking Sri Krishna's death as the basis. It's simpler, not because I really think it's right or wrong. What happens is that Sri Krishna drives the chariot, and in those days, both sides respected each other. After all, Duryodhana went to Nakula or Sahadeva, who was supposed to be an expert astrologer, to ask him when the battle should start. So they are going in between, and everybody is acknowledging each other. And somewhere there, Arjuna gets a funk. He says, I'm not going to scrap. These people are all people with whom I've lived and loved. And it makes no sense for me to be scrapping with them. So the first chapter of Srimad Bhagavad-Gita is entirely devoted to the experience of change within Arjuna. That is, he is starting the day full of enthusiasm. He is going to fight at last for the land that he thinks that is his. But once he goes in between the two armies and he sees everybody blowing conches and beating drums and rattling their weapons, he realizes that, boss, I don't want to do this. This is wholesale slaughter, and this is not what I want to do. So, this is the sum and substance of chapter 1. How does it translate into the real world? In the real world, it's very straightforward. Change is continuous. Some change we like, but very often the change that we get is not the change we want. Let us look at some examples of the near past. The Ukraine-Russian war is happening. It has changed financials, it has changed people, it has polarized the world. Similarly, Israel-Palestine conflict. Change, it has happened. It is not a pretty sight, it is not a pleasant sight. Here is the US telling Iran, you have to do like this. Iran saying, go to hell. What does that result in? War. It is resulting in conflict. It is resulting in confrontation. Houthis go and start shooting ships. Change. That means there is an increase in demurrages, there is an increase in insurance, there is an increase in all kinds of things. So, one of the major lessons of chapter 1 is that change is inevitable. Change is continuous. When one day you are a bachelor, the next day you are a married man. Change. And within 6 months, you are not the person you used to be. You get a child. The first time I held my baby, I couldn't believe that it was my child. I'm saying, is it possible for something like this to be part of me? But at the same time, there is an attachment that is created. What is this attachment? And that is now flowing into chapter 2, where Sri Krishna is impressing upon Arjuna, listen, what you are crying for is not what you think it is. It is all temporary. Everything that you are seeing is temporary. These people are all slated to die. I am there. I am the one who is deciding that fate. Who do you think you are? Why do you have such a big opinion of yourself? There is no need. Everybody is going to die, including you. So stop worrying about these things. You have decided to fight. You've got an objective of fighting. Go and fight. Why is it that he has to fight? Because as a Kshatriya, it is his dharma. The only thing that the Kshatriya is able to do is to protect others and to gain territory. That is the dharma of the Kshatriya. The dharma of the Kshatriya is not to till land, not to be a judge and all that. That's not his job. His job is protection and aggression. So he trains from day one. His entire chivalry is based on certain rules. Those rules are things like you will have battle only from morning to evening. I am talking about Indian Kshatriyas, Bharat Kshatriyas. I am not talking about samurais. I am not talking about the medieval knights of Europe. We are not talking about those people. We are talking about Kshatriyas of India. All these others have also got their own rules. Samurais had their own rules of valor, of chivalry. Similarly, the knights had their own rules of valor. Even those Western people who used to take out, all those Western dishum, they also have their own rules. You cannot shoot a person in the back and all those kinds of things. Whether it is real or unreal, we don't know. But our Kshatriyas definitely had rules. You could not hit somebody below the waist. Now, another thing that we must recognize during this war is that it is somewhere when the Copper Age was ending and the Iron Age is starting. So what does this mean? It means that the swords were made of copper. The primary weapon was a stick with a heavy piece of stone or metal at the other end, which is why the gada is such an important weapon of choice. The third main important weapon was the spear or the javelin, which is a stick with a sharpened end. The sword was not a particularly important weapon during that period. It is very important that you understand this. Second thing is, that is also the reason why wrestling was so important. Because the entire chivalry was based on your ability to control the opponent in a wrestling match. So wrestling was a very important tool that they exerted during as Kshatriyas. So we need to look at the time period and recognize that whatever you've seen in that Chopra or whoever, that Mahabharata thing, where he wears those jigna stuff, all that armor and all that, that's all humbug. The armor was fundamentally pieces of wood with some copper plating and leather on top of it. Let's also be very unclear that the bow that they used, the bow string that they used, the compound bow that they had was multiple wooden staves which had animal fat, sinew, as the structure which provided the tensile strength to the bow, so that the draw would have a greater tension and would allow the output velocity would be much higher, so the trajectory of the arrow would be flatter. So that was fundamentally the compound bow. And we must recognize that the bow string was made from sinews of animals. So in all probability, it was the cow or the other animal which has longer muscles, which would have been used as the sinew for the bowstring. These are realities which we must accept. So, in chapter 2, first thing he says is, boss, don't think you are the end of the earth. Everything that you are seeing is temporary. All these people are going to die. So then the question becomes, if everything is temporary, what is permanent? And there he begins to explain the qualities of the Brahman, that it cannot be broken, I mean it is not affected by fire, it cannot be cut, it cannot be this, it cannot be that. But no matter what he says, it is not possible to understand that the quality of the Brahman cannot be understood by words, fundamentally because of the limitations of language. So what happens is that he has to keep on repeating various things again and again in order to make Arjuna understand. So he keeps telling him, this is what it is, this is what it is, this is what it is. And then in the end, he also tells him that in order to achieve the Brahman, you have to aspire and reach a state of cognition called Sthita Prajna. Sthita means steady, Prajna means awareness. So what is this awareness? Let us now look at awareness as a subject. So right now I am aware of my environment. But if you will really notice, when my awareness is external, my internal awareness is nullified. I cannot be aware of both things. It is not. It requires enormous amount of practice for me to be able to be aware of what is inside me, at the same time be aware of my environment. And that when I am able to, the stages are very straightforward. First, I need to be aware that I am having this problem where when my external environment or my external awareness, I lose internal awareness. That's the first part. The second part is I start looking inside, and then I realize that there are multiple filters which stop me from being aware of the internal processes that are happening. And that means that I need to get through Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha. All of this I need to be able to transcend and control. So when I go out of Annamaya Kosha and reach Pranamaya Kosha, my need for physical forms reduces. So I become Nirarupa. I become a person who is not really requiring Rupa to understand what is happening. Similarly, when I go past Manomaya Kosha, I am beginning to understand what are the building blocks of creation. That is the various bhutas, that is, we've got earth, water, and things like that. These building blocks that drive nature. So those I begin to get aware. When I get into Manomaya Kosha, there I begin to recognize that everything is driven by the gunas. When I go into Vijnanamaya Kosha and let go of those gunas, I am getting into what we call Nirguna state. And when I go beyond the Nirguna, I merge with the Brahman. But that comes in ifs and buts, in fits and starts. That fits and starts has to be made steady. And I have to be continuously anchored in the Brahman. When I have to be continuously anchored in the Brahman, so what happens is there are 4 stages. The first stage is Shipta. Shipta means it's scattered everywhere, it's scattered all over the place. Then it becomes Muda. Muda means what? I become fixed in certain ideas. Then I go into Vikshipta stage. Vikshipta means there is some order, some understanding of what is happening. My awareness is slowly getting aligned with some things that are, it's more steady. Then after that, ekagrata, slowly it gets into a single loop, it gets into a single linear, it gets into a linear fashion, it becomes linear. And then afterwards, it completely envelops me. So, Niruddha, it's called Niruddha stage or Samadhi. If we have to be there, then what happens is we are internally completely secured in the Brahman, and then we are working in the environment. And that state is called Sthita Prajna. And that is what he flows into chapter 3 and talks to everybody about, talks to Arjuna about action. First, he talks about what action is, how it manifests, and what is his contribution to action. What are the senses? How do the senses get data? How are they processed? And how it becomes an outcome? And how we become personal? It becomes personal to us. So that is what he is talking about in chapter 3. So what happens is that even though the Brahman is the one that is the framework on which we are functioning, as we begin to work in society, we form a set of rules. These rules are there for order, so that we don't live in a state of chaos all our lives. That order, unfortunately, is also the chain which holds us down and does not allow us to progress further. So, what Sri Krishna says is that at some point in time, you have to go forward and understand the mechanics of karma, how this whole system functions. And at the same time, once you reach that point of maturity, you have to regress. You have to slowly let those things go and come to a point where you're becoming a Sthita Prajna. You are able to understand what is evolved inside yourself, how you have evolved, what is this transition that you are in, why everything is temporary, what is permanent, and how to remain within the Samadhi state and yet act, so that you are contributing, you are adding value, but you are not affected by it. So what we call, he teaches Arjuna, or he tries to teach Arjuna, that Arjuna has to remove the person from the problem. Arjuna must remove personality from all solutions. It has to be something that he does without expectation of return or as a sacrifice. Something that he does not really view as Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says, like a duck in water, like a lotus in a pond. He is there, yet not there. When that happens, so the way you get to Sthita Prajna can be from multiple angles. So here, Sri Krishna talks about Karma Yoga, that is to act without having personality involved in the action, and it is very difficult. Why is it difficult? Because every time you breathe, there is air going inside. When prana comes in, every blob of prana, every quanta of prana gives you character. That character drives you in a particular direction. And that direction is your natural state. The natural state of an individual is X. The natural state of a stone is Y. The prana that exists everywhere drives the individual or any entity, whether it is jiva or jadam. A jiva is a sentient creature, a jadam is an insentient creature. It drives everything. So the minute you take prana in, that prana begins to drive your innate nature. when that innate nature begins to get driven, then you begin to identify yourself with whatever you are in. And that is the start of the problem. So you need to still be breathing, at the same time not allowing that prana, the characteristics of prana or the characteristics which are then driven by prana, you should not allow it to affect your individuality or asmita. When that happens, your sense of doership subdues. Sense of doership means ahankara. That subdues, and when that subdues, then what happens is you begin to act without that action impacting you. So you are neither looking at anything as a permanent or impermanent thing. You are there. Your awareness is constantly seeking the permanence of the Brahman, but the action remains because it is Prakriti. You are driven by action. You are driven by Prakriti, but you are not affected by either the stimulus or the response. This is what he is saying in chapter 3. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to ask people for their views and input. Thank you.